Hey everyone, welcome to Life After Work. My name is Solomon. It's been a while since I've posted. I'll get to that later. I don't want to cover that in this video. This video I'd like to use to address what seems to be going around the model community right now, and that's modelers explaining what got them into modeling. And I've enjoyed watching everybody's videos. A lot of good stories out there. So I thought I'd put mine up. I don't know if it'll be as interesting as others, but it is what it is. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to start off by taking you back to 1951. Now, no, I wasn't modeling in 51, but I want to tell you some things that hopefully will help you understand why I model what I model when I did finally begin modeling. Now, if you'll look right up here, this is where we lived in 1951. It's an 8-foot wide, 30-foot long trailer in Waukegan, Illinois. My father was stationed at Great Lakes Naval Base. I was getting a lot of Navy. His younger brother was in the Navy. His first cousin was in the Navy. Our father, of course, was in the Navy. So we were kind of a Navy family. Well, that 30-foot long, 8-foot wide, 240 square foot trailer didn't give us 240 square feet to do a lot in, because we shared it with cabinets and tables and chairs and beds and closets. Really wasn't any room at all in it. But my father was a guy that worked with his hands. He had to work with his hands. He had always worked with his hands from the time he was a little boy. And he was a machinist mate in the Navy, a chief machinist mate. So we didn't have any place to do much. And in that little trailer, again, right up here, lived my father, my mother, and my brother and I, a family of 4. And that wasn't the smallest trailer we had lived in. But in the evenings, after dinner and everything was cleaned up, my mother would teach my brother and I how to read using the Bible. And if my father was home, wasn't on duty at the base, he would teach me to read from a book that was a history of the Navy. I wish I knew the name of the book and the bureau number on it, because I'd love to get it again. It really told everything about the history of the Navy, going all the way back to the beginning of the U.S. So that's what I grew up on. I grew up reading that. So now let's fast forward to the mid-50s, 55, from 51, 4 years later. We had moved into a house. Now that house we thought was the biggest thing in the world. It was about 1,200 square feet. Every square foot of it was used up just by furniture. So again, it wasn't a palace. But in my brother and I's bedroom, 2 beds, twin beds, 2 small 4-drawer chests, pretty much filled the room. There was just enough room at the foot of my bed for a card table in the corner of the room. And we know they're not very big. But that was where we were to study and, do our writing and what have you. And of course, reading, which I did all the time, I'd be up on the bed curled up with a book. Well, we didn't have a lot of hobby shops the way we do today. Basically, if you wanted a model, we could go down to the local Five and Dime. We had a Ben Franklin Five and Dime, and they had stacks of models and some glue. Not a lot of stuff, but they had some. And right up the street from where we lived, there was a drugstore, pharmacy, and they had a section that had a lot more models in it. Now, I don't know if that's because the man who owned the pharmacy had a son my age and he liked to do models, but long story short, that's where I got my models. Now, when I was 10, I bought my first model. I had been raised from the beginning to do things with your hands. Connect your hands with your brain. Building models was a form of problem solving. I don't really have a problem today with kids doing video games because that's problem solving, keeping the brain active, doing stuff like that. My only problem is when you finish a video game, what do you have? Pretty much memory of doing a video game or a score that you remember. And if you do a model, when you're finished with it, you've got a model. Well, like I said, we didn't have much room in this bedroom, but we did have that card table. So I got my first model. Now, I'm going to show you that first model. It's not a picture of the actual model. It's not the actual model. But I found one recently. Now, I saved my nickels and dimes for weeks to buy that model. And it only cost $1.50. Well, I found it. I did a query in Google on antique models. And I found that model in a box, unopened. And that's it. It's the Corsair. I've mentioned to people before that I love the Corsair. It's a Navy airplane. The Marines and the Navy flew this plane. It was designed to fly off carriers, but they had a lot of trouble with it until they fixed some problems. And I think the British fixed the problem. They had some of them, and they somehow came up with a solution. So late in World War II, they began to be carrier-based, but they were island-based in World War II. But I love that plane. Well, I paid $11 for this. I wish I'd bought about 100 of them when I could get them for $1.50, but $1.50 was hard to come by. So that was my start. Now, I'm not going to build this model again, to be honest with you. This is probably a re-release of it, but I'm not going to build it again. I got it, let's say, for nostalgia, because I really love the plane. So anyway, I sat down and tried to remember, because I bought models from the time I was 10 until I was about 16. And I remember I had a bunch of them. When I'd finish them, there was no room in the end. I mean, literally no room. So I would put thread on them and get a thumbtack and stick them in the ceiling over my bed and over my brother's bed. And I put maps that came from National Geographic that I got on paper drives, because we couldn't really afford National Geographic then. And I had covered 2 walls, the only available walls in the room, with 3 maps. One was a map of the world. That was everything. One was a map of North America, and one was a map of South America, and South and Central America. And I built these models, and, I had them all over the ceiling, and I'd be laying on my bed reading a book and looking up at the models and looking at the map. One day my mother stepped in and said, "You plan on going somewhere?" Well, I guess that's the first time it really stuck in my mind that, yeah, I was going to go. I was going to go travel the world, and I have been very fortunate. But I was trying to think of the models that I built. The Corsair was easy to remember because that was the first one, and that was my favorite. Well, I sat down. It's taken me over a week to remember all of the models that I did. We'll get into that in a little bit, why that's so hard. But I had planes, and this model shop is ships, trains, and planes. Well, I got planes. I did a B-25 bomber, did my Corsair, a DC-7 TWA passenger plane, Trans World Airlines passenger plane, a DC-3 cargo plane, a P-51 Lightning, and I believe that had the Merlin engine. I wanted the model because I thought it's so cool. I love the P-38s and what have you, but the Merlin engine, that's like magic, Merlin the magician. So I thought that was cool. I had a little Piper Cub and a Sikorsky rescue helicopter. All of these were from the mid to late 50s and the very early 60s. 60, 61 really, because I didn't do much modeling past 61. For cars, I had a 57 Ford two-door hardtop because we had a 57 Ford two-door, and a 34 Ford Coupe. Now that one, if any of you've seen the California Kid, that came out in the 60s. Martin Sheen was in it. There was a custom car in it, a 3-window, fully flamed out. Well, this was well before that, and it was a 34 Ford Coupe model that I painted black and was fully flamed out. It was kind of interesting. I guess that's why I like the movie California Kid so much. Their car was almost like the one I had built. But then I got, and this isn't a car, but it's in that category, and it's a Visible V8. Now that Visible V8 was a pretty good size model. It was about like that, and it had everything in it. It had cylinders, it had pistons, it had the crankshaft, it had connecting rods, rockers, everything that a regular V8 had, but the block was clear plastic, and you had to put it all together. And if you didn't clean every piece really well, if you weren't very careful with the glue, it wouldn't run. And this thing had to run. It came with a battery you put together, and inside the car battery looking piece, you had a battery. And it literally ran a little motor in the starter that turned the flywheel, that turned the crank, that pushed, I mean, you get the point. It was a working engine in that respect. So that taught me a tremendous amount of patience and a little style in doing the modeling. I couldn't slap it together for sure. I had to be very precise with it. So, and it worked. It worked the first time. So I was really pleased with that. I had ships, obviously. And the fact that in 1951 we lived by a naval base and I was around ships all the time, I was into ships and reading the history of the Navy. It had a lot about the American Navy, but it had a lot about other navies as well. So I ended up getting Sir Francis Drake's ship that was from the 1570s and 80s, the Golden Hind. I got a Hawaiian Pilot freighter. Now, here's the thing about that Hawaiian Pilot freighter. It was a 1955 model. I looked that up. I didn't know that at the time. And I got it about that time. It was a new model. It turns out that Hawaiian Pilot was a victory ship from World War II that had been sold to the civilians. And when I joined the Navy, the first ship I was on was exactly the same ship as that Hawaiian Pilot freighter. So I kind of knew my way around topside because I had built that model and it was still in my mind at the time. So that was a lot of fun. I got the Mayflower, the pilgrim ship, the ship that brought the pilgrims to America, for those of you who may not know American history. Then I got a strange ship, and I don't know why, but this was I think a 1960s model, or 1960 model, or 59. Anyway, it was the SMS Sea Adler, which is German for Sea Eagle. That was actually an American-built ship. It was a sailing ship, and it was the last of the combat ships that the Navy built, or that America built. Well, it was captured in World War I by the Germans. They renamed it the Sea Eagle, the Sea Adler, and of course then we never really got it back, I guess, till the war was over. I had to get the USS Constitution. I mean, let's face it, that was one of the first ships that the Navy had, and it was commissioned in the 1790s, I think, and it's still commissioned today. It's never been out of commission. The USS Cutty Sark. Now that's a British clipper ship from the 1880s. Now, you don't have to ask yourself, did they name the whiskey after the Cutty Sark, or did they name the Cutty Sark after the whiskey? The ship came first, guys. I know. You'd think it'd be the other way around. And then I did a Viking ship, and I remember doing the Viking ship after I laid there and thought about it and thought about it. I said, man, I remember doing that Viking ship because it had rows of shields and a decal on every one of those shields. And that was fiddly because we didn't have a lot of the products we have today, Microsol and Microset and stuff like that. So when you put a decal on a curved surface, it never really looked good. So we've got some good products that we can use today. A couple of things I never did get that I wanted to get. One was the USS George Washington, which was a missile launching sub. I've mentioned this to several of you. I think Charlie McCarthy and some others. That it had a see-through side. You could look inside. Well, this was one of the early, very early missile launching subs that America had. And then my favorite airplane that was a non-combat plane was a seaplane. It was a Flying Goose. It was a Grumman Goose. And they built the last one just after World War II. And they were still in service on a regular basis in Alaska up till not too many years ago. And a lot of people still get them and convert them to private airplanes. They're still out there. They're still being rebuilt. It's an amazing plane, but I do love the Grumman Goose. So that's 20 models that I built in just a few years between the age of 10 and 16. So that took up my time, and I enjoyed doing it. But you know, life comes at you. You do what you can. When you're 16 and you want a driver's license, you want a date, whatever, priorities change. Plus, you still have the responsibilities of school, family, all that kind of stuff. So I basically quit modeling. Now, I never stopped thinking about it really, but I just didn't have time for it. And moving around, like I said, I did travel around the world and have lived all over the world. Matter of fact, when I retired out of China, and just before that, it was a Mongolian assignment. So, it was kind of hard to carry all your modeling stuff around with you. Now, that's an excuse. I could have worked something out, but it seemed like a really difficult thing to do at the time. Now, that means I had to get back into modeling. What got me back into modeling? Well, about 4 months before I retired out of China, I came home for a short vacation because we had a family reunion to go to. And I got on the airplane in Shanghai, headed for Atlanta. That's a 16-hour flight. And we no sooner took off than I got violently ill, and I was throwing up literally continuously for 16 hours. Now, this is where this video is going to be a little lesson learned for some people, maybe not everyone. Got to Atlanta, wasn't feeling much better, late plane, finally got a flight to Knoxville, got in at midnight. The wife had got the day wrong because of the time changes and what have you. So I had to get a taxi. Got home, I don't know, 12:30, 1 o'clock. Got up the next morning. We drove 5 hours to get to a family reunion, and still felt bad. Did a couple of functions, went back to the motel and crashed. We went back home, 5 hours back. I spent a few days just resting. Thought I had a bacterial infection. Flew back to China. 4 months later, I came home. I retired. I needed to spend time seeing a doctor. Turned out I had a heart attack. That was a heart attack. I've heard about pain in the arm. I've heard pain in the chest. I've heard all these things. And believe me, my family's got a lot of heart disease in it. No one had ever mentioned that throwing up incessantly for hours and possibly days was a sign of a heart attack. We had that happen again just at the end of last year. Brother-in-law's daughter from a previous marriage, in her 40s, same age as my eldest daughter, or a year or so older than her. She'd been throwing up for like 3 days, and her husband finally said, "I'm taking you to the emergency room." She died on the way to the hospital. That's just a little information. But that's when I found out I had a heart problem. And I'd always known about the heart problem in the family and had taken care of myself, but it's genetic. So, long story short, within because I was in pretty good physical condition, 4 weeks after the quadruple bypass, I was walking 4 miles a day, doing my daily cardios, going to the gym, whatever. And got to feeling pretty good. Well, I got a phone call wanting me to do some consulting work for a Dutch company that had bought a plant in Texas that I was familiar with. It was a methanol plant. So I said, sure, I'll give you 6 months. Because I basically didn't want to work anymore. I figured I wanted to be home with my wife. But I did it for 6 months. At the end of the 6 months, I had pneumonia. Wasn't doing well. But I was finished. My job had pretty well been accomplished, and everyone was happy. I even had managed to get on a Dutch radio show. I got interviewed by the Dutch media. So it was a lot of fun. So I came home, kind of cleared up from the pneumonia, and 6 months later got another phone call that Trans-Canadian Pipeline folks up in Canada had a pumping station and storage facility in Oklahoma that they were having some trouble with and wanted to know if I'd go spend 3 months down there. So I said, sure. Well, at the end of the 3 months, they were more than willing for me to stay on. They thought I'd done a great job, but I had not done a good job in my mind. I'm very picky about my performance. So I begged off, came home. I told them something wasn't right, something was going on. And went to see the doctor, and they sent me to a specialist at University of Tennessee Medical Center, and they found out that I'd had a stroke. My wife remembers when I had the stroke. I don't. I have no memory of ever having had a stroke, but I know there's a lot of things I can't remember. I had lost a lot, and I was depressed because I was diagnosed pre-Alzheimer. Now, when you're like 66 or 67 and you hear the words Alzheimer, that's scary. I mean, you hope you still have quite a few years to go, but that kind of shortens it. So I got some prescription for some Alzheimer medicine. I never filled it. I refused to fill it. I didn't want to take any more pills, but I needed to do something for my brain. And then after a lot of thought and weeks of thinking, I remembered modeling. I said, that's what I need to do. Get back into scale work. Get into details. Don't do these simple models. Get something that'll really challenge my brain. I was not on a schedule. I wasn't, I didn't have any particular requirements for my time. So I thought I'll do that. But I had not planned properly. That's why I have a channel called Life After Work. I'm telling you, you need to plan something. No matter if it's, you've got little kids at home and you're working 50 hours a week, you need to plan something for when you're not working. Because remember, and this is my mantra now, unfortunately, as a workaholic for 40 years, it was not my mantra for a long time. But we don't live to work, we work to live. So that's kind of the message that I like Life After Work to take to people. So what did I do? Well, I didn't have a place to work. The area that my shop is in now was filled with bins, filled with trains, filled with small tools and what have you. And a lot of them modeling tools that I had had for years and years and years. I think I mentioned in one of my videos I have that Pache H, Model H airbrush, and I've had it for 50 years. So, a lot of my stuff has been around, and I hauled it around in crates, but it never got uncrated for 50 years. But I had to make room here, so I I decided to finish building storage bin racks over here that I could put my bins in. But I was struggling. I had had a stroke. I had had heart surgery. I was having severe blood pressure problems because we hadn't got that regulated. Still don't have it totally regulated, but it's better. And it took me from the time I started till I finished just this basic table that I'm leaning on 3 months. And keep in mind, I was a woodworker for years and years. I built cabinets, I designed and built furniture, and I didn't even build most of this. I just built the top. The base sections I bought unfinished at a big box store. And it still took me 3 months. I couldn't work very many hours. I couldn't, a couple of hours and I was wiped for the day. So it took me 3 months just to get this set up. Then, and in the process, I realized I needed to build these shelving units behind me, and they sit on top of another big shelving unit to put hand tools on, because I had to continually solve problems. So it even extended beyond the 3 months. So I still wasn't building models. But that was good exercise for the brain. I had to solve the problem of where everything went, a place for everything, everything in its place. And I got that resolved. Well, I had one subscriber on YouTube. I had just changed my YouTube channel. I only had a channel because I wanted to look at videos and comment on them. And I'd had it since I was in China when I did that. So that was 2007, 2008. So I'd already had it for a while. And I changed the name to Life After Work, and I got a subscriber, one subscriber, an intrepid soul, David Howard. I'll try to remember to put his name up here. He stayed with me. He's still a subscriber, and we comment all the time on our videos. He's got a nice train layout and a koi pond and what have you. So I enjoy his videos a lot. You might want to go check it out if you're into trains. So at any rate, I asked Dave what kind of camera he used, and he said a Panasonic. Well, my brain wasn't working. I've been a techie for years. I've had every kind of video camera from the very first ones back in the late 70s that you can name. But most of the equipment I've ever had was Panasonic. And why it didn't occur to me to get a Panasonic, I don't know. My brain wasn't functioning well. So I got the Panasonic. Like I said, I've used all this stuff for years. I've been on computers since the first desktops, when a 10 megabyte hard drive was huge. That's megabyte. And I had to learn how to use that camera. Then I had to get an editing program. So I asked Dave what editing program he used, and he told me which one. It was Cyberlink. I got it. I've used every kind of software you can name. And I was a power user on some of the most complex software. But I just couldn't figure it out. I couldn't get a video uploaded. I couldn't get them up. I couldn't get them edited. I couldn't get them uploaded. I messed up the camera all the time. I was really, really struggling to do anything because my brain just wasn't functioning. The executive functions of the brain, control, problem solving, getting things organized in a row. It's like Einstein, I believe it was, that said that if it wasn't for time, everything would happen all at once. And that's kind of what my brain was doing. I was getting overwhelmed very quickly. It took me a year to post my first video, and you can go out and look at that video right now on my channel and say, well, that looks good. Did a fine job. No one will ever know how difficult it was during that year to get to the point that I could post that video. And I wasn't sure I could keep it up. I really didn't have a lot of confidence at the time. But then I got the model shop going, and I put a video up of building the model shop because I had taken pictures and a little bit of video with my phone and what have you. But I had to get going on a model. So after quite a bit of time, I got going on the New Jersey. And I'm still on it. Now, you'll know, most of you, that I am not very productive. I'm slow. I still can't work more than a couple of hours a day. I get overwhelmed easily. I am still having a lot of problems with both my blood pressure and my mental cognitive reasoning. However, the doctor that had mentioned pre-Alzheimer has since said that by doing all of this work with these models, building this shop, arranging things, working on my trains, doing the stuff that I've been doing, I am no longer pre-Alzheimer. I still have damage to my brain. I still have cognitive issues, but modeling, this model shop, this community, doing the things that I've done on YouTube has just turned me around so that I have a decent life now instead of, 70 years old, 3-4 years later, I'm not normal. And if you've seen my videos, you probably have already decided that. Anyway, that was just an aside. But the fact is, I have much more confidence now that I will be able to sustain where I'm at. Will I ever get healed? No. I occasionally will have a little mini stroke. I have had cases where my blood pressure was so high it was stroke level. My doctor, actually his physician's assistant, and I have continually kept track of blood pressure and adjusted the medications. I have fallen a lot. I wake up with bruises and I don't remember falling. My wife will tell me I had a fall. I fell from the second floor of the house to the first floor of the house, down the stairs one day with no memory of that. It was getting scary. And from that aspect, it still is. But every day I go walking, and I walk 2 to 3 miles, doing my cardio, and I walk fairly fast. And I spend as much time here at the table as I can. The New Jersey is coming along, but slowly, because I'm not very prolific. I just can't put in the hours I want to put in. I tried to get several models going at once and got overwhelmed fairly easily. So this entire adventure, figuring out the spray booth, figuring out my computer systems, all that stuff has been therapeutic, and I had modeling to fall back on. So for those of you who model just because you want to have something to put on a shelf, I applaud you. I don't care when I finish a model if I put it on somebody else's shelf or not, because to me it's the exercise of doing it. It's the satisfaction of actually getting it done. And right now I'm getting very keen. I set a goal, because they have to set goals, that by the end of 2017 I would have the New Jersey finished, completely finished, ready to go on the shelf. Well, I'm running behind because I have, in the past few weeks, for instance, it's been a struggle for me to get myself out here to do what I need to do, because the fluctuations of blood pressure, the effects of being overwhelmed, all that kind of stuff. I deal with that every day, and I got a little overwhelmed because my computer system went down. Well, first of all, my Wi-Fi went down. My Wi-Fi went down. We had a lot of severe storms. Last night we had a pretty severe storm, but fortunately didn't lose anything. I have internet provided by cable service, very high speed. But we lost it during the past few weeks. We've lost it for 48 hours nearly. And then my Wi-Fi, I guess, got hit by the same problem. So I had to get my Wi-Fi up and going. I got a new computer, and I'll have that in the next video. And I've decided to rearrange some of the wiring in here and my power so that I can hook up this new computer. Now, I bought all of the components for this new computer, including the case, and sent them to a gentleman by the name of Kerry Holtzman. He's out in Arizona. He has a YouTube channel. He builds computers, and he's been doing it for years and years. So I asked him if he'd build it for me, and he very graciously agreed to do that, even though his channel is to show us how to build them. Well, I built 2 computers over the past 50 years, and with what I wanted, I didn't want to take a chance on getting overwhelmed, getting confused, and not being able to finish it. So Kerry graciously agreed to do it for me. Well, I've got it now, ready to put it in, ready to get it installed, and I'm working on that right now. As soon as that's up and running, I'll be able to sit over here and work on a model. I'll have 2 video screens, and I'll get into that later, but one of them I'll have my email on, and the other one I'll have YouTube on, and I'll be able to read and watch emails and YouTube while I'm modeling. So that will help me get past this problem. Well, in the time that my computer was down, my internet was down, I had 300 emails come in. And that 300 emails had videos on all of them, and I want to watch everyone's videos. A lot of effort goes into it. I know that. I know what kind of effort I have to put into it. And everybody has their own challenges, be it availability of time or whatever. But I want to watch, I want to comment, I want people to know that they're appreciated. So I'll be able to do that a little bit better with the new setup. So I'm working on that right now, and I'll have another video out soon. So that's basically my story about getting back into modeling. And there's a few caveats to it. Now, I'm going to turn my back to you. I know that's impolite. I've got a model, a static model of a steam locomotive called the General. I think I've shown you that before. You've seen the submarine model that I've got. I've got a B-29 Super Fortress. I've got the big model of the USS Constitution. I've also picked up 2 more sailing ships that are very complex, because I don't make anything easy. I don't get a simple model to build. I could build this fairly quickly. And I say I do have a couple that are fairly simple that I want to build because I've never built them before. But I need something a little more complex to keep my brain active, keep me working, so that I don't backslide, for one thing. And I don't know how much more improvement I can have next Monday. Well, this is Saturday. Day after tomorrow, I go back for some more brain tests to see if I'm holding my own. But the 2 sailing ships that I've got, I bought the 1/100 Soleil Royale and the 1/100 HMS Victory, both of them Heller models. The Soleil Royale, the instructions are in French. Well, I used to speak French. I can still read and understand some French, and this is an opportunity for me to work that other part of the brain, to try to get it back in shape. And I plan on taking those instructions first. I'm going to scan them, translate the French into English, paste everything back together and put me a book together that will have the instructions in English. I know, that's crazy. Probably don't even need to do that. But I know I've read a lot of reviews of that model. It's a good model, but a lot of reviews are from Americans who are upset because they weren't told before they bought the model that the instructions were in French. Well, maybe I can resolve some of that. If I get that done, I'll put the word out there in the modeling community. If you want a copy of those in English, I'll send them to you. I'm going to build to the English and the French. I'll probably use the French more than the English, but still, that's something to exercise my brain the way I need it exercised. I've also got that big Battleship Missouri. I've got to finish my brother's 64.5 Mustang. I've got 3 tanks now. John, you did it to me, buddy. I got 3 tanks. So I want to get around to building one of those. But at some point, now my brother has already mentioned, he was the other one in that picture I had at the start of this. The handsome one was me. He was the other kid on the bicycle. But he says, you're not going to live long enough to finish all these models. Well, I'm hoping if I continue to improve, I will get faster. I will get better. And maybe move ahead and get some of them done. I know what my next model is going to be. My next model after the New Jersey, starting in January hopefully, is going to be People's Choice. I'm going to put on this table, I'm going to put the box with the Heller Soleil Royale. I'm going to put the box with the HMS Victory, and I'm going to put the USS Constitution. They are all large, complicated, fully rigged sailing ships. And I'm going to put a number on each one, and I'm going to ask my community to vote on them and tell me which one they want me to do next. Whichever model wins that's my next model. So they're all equally complex. They're all highly rigged. So they're all good for me, but I can't do them all at once. So I thought we'd just do People's Choice. Now, if I can get better, I got another model. This may be, I don't know when I'll get to this. I want to do so many other things first, but I have this in my stash, and I've told you every model I've got in my stash right now. I don't have 50, 60, 100, but the ones I have take a lot of time to get them done if you're going to do them right. And I'm doing them the most complicated way I can, just because I got to work the brain. But this model, it's a Tamiya model, and I know some people call it Tamiya. I call it Tamiya, M-I, because my favorite musical is Mamma Mia, M-I. Okay, and I'm not going to change the name of that movie or that song to Mamma Mia. So anyway, here it is. I know this will come as a great surprise. How you like that? This ain't your daddy's Corsair. This is highly detailed. It's got a clear cowl on it, so you can replace the regular cowl with the clear cowl and see the detail in the engine. But I'm going to finish my modeling career with a Corsair. So that's where it started. That's where it's going to end. So that's my modeling story, and I'm going to go ahead and publish this, get it out there. Feel free to comment, like it, dislike it, whatever you choose. But I've said it before, if you don't like it, if you want to give it a thumbs down, do that, but please leave a comment down below and let me know what I can do to improve my channel. I'm doing everything I can think of And that's a challenge, like I've said, but I'm doing what I can do. So everyone, listen, have a great weekend. My next video will be up as soon as I can get started taping the installation of this new computer. And I want to tell you what kind of computer it is. And, well, it's a custom computer, but what's in it and what my plans are with it. So anyway, have a good weekend, and I'll see you next time on the Life After Work channel here in the STP Model Shop. Bye.